Welcome to Top Headline. I'm Christian Gomez with The New American, and today we're met with Alex Newman in regards to his article, Congressman Introduces Bill to Get the U.S. Out of the UN. Alex, thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you on the program today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Christian. It's great to be with you.
So it looks like a bill has been introduced in Congress to get us out of the United Nations. I don't think that Speaker Pelosi will be happy with this. Tell us more about the bill.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Pelosi will not be pleased. This is the American Sovereignty Restoration Act. It's Bill H.R. 204 this time around. And a very simple bill. It does a couple of simple but very powerful things. Repeals the UN Participation Act. Basically ends all of our involvement in the United Nations. It calls for the eviction of the UN's headquarters from American soil, so they can move it to Havana or Pyongyang or Tehran, someplace more to their liking. Maybe I hear Harare is nice this time of year. And ends the placing of U.S. troops under UN command, gets us out of all these auxiliary UN agencies, and also ends our involvement in a whole bunch of different UN agreements and pseudo treaties that infringe on our sovereignty. So simple but very powerful bill, and would definitely set the globalists back decades, maybe generations, maybe more.
So who introduced this bill in Congress again?
Well, the chief sponsor was Congressman Mike Rogers of Alabama. He was also the chief sponsor in the last Congress. Unfortunately, it never made it out of the House Foreign Affairs Committee in the last Congress. Also co-sponsoring the bill is Representative Thomas Massey, probably one of the most constitutional members of Congress. And so we had a chance to interview him up in Wisconsin a few months ago, and he told us a little bit about the bill and why he's supporting it. So we included that in our article if people want to check it out. And I think they've got a few other co-sponsors right now, and hopefully they're lining up some more as we speak. I think last time around there was 9 or 10 who co-sponsored it. Hopefully they'll be able to get a few more this year. We'll have to see.
Now, this isn't the first time that such a bill has been introduced in Congress, right?
That's right. It's been introduced for decades. Congressman Larry McDonald and Congressman Ron Paul used to be the big champions of this. They introduced it for decades. And then the baton was passed on to Representative Paul Brown, and on down the line now, Mike Rogers has picked up the baton. But unfortunately, the bill has not yet been voted on by the whole House of Representatives. It seems that the deep state members of the leadership don't want this bill moving anywhere. But there are some indications that members of Congress are getting tired of the UN. It seems that the constant criticism of Israel has really got even a lot of establishment members of Congress upset, including some Democrats. A couple of years ago, they were really upset when the UN voted against Israel on a number of important things. And so we'll see. I think anti-UN sentiment is building, and we'll have to see whether this bill moves anywhere.
Now, regarding that anti-UN sentiment, you mentioned how other congressmen in the past, Larry McDonald, Congressman Ron Paul, Congressman Brown, have introduced this bill and its predecessors' versions of the bill in the past. But what's the difference between the time periods when those congressmen proposed these bills in the past and now in relation to the anti-UN sentiment?
Well, the big difference is that right now we have President Trump in the White House, and he has been very firm in speaking out against globalism and in defense of national sovereignty. In fact, he used his speech at the UN General Assembly last year to talk about how Americans reject the ideology of globalism. We're going to be governed by Americans, not international bureaucrats. Global governance is a threat, not just to America, but to the whole world. We need to fight this back. And according to news reports, he actually asked his UN ambassador, who just recently departed, Nikki Haley, whether we have any use for the UN. Is there any reason why we ought to stay involved in that? And apparently Nikki Haley, according to the news reports, according to what she told some reporters, said, I don't know. The verdict is still out. So the anti-UN sentiment is obviously spreading. Again, even some of the Democrat leadership has expressed very serious reservations about the UN due to their constant attacks on the state of Israel. And, whether you like Israel or not, it's not the point. The point is that the United Nations is coming under increasing pressure, and the days of just constantly spitting in our face and telling us that it's raining, I think those days are coming to an end. People in Washington, D.C. are upset. The American people are upset. And the current occupant of the White House is, really a new phenomenon. Throughout my whole lifetime, we've typically had globalists of one sort or another in the White House, and that's different right now. So hopefully, this bill can get some support from the top, if you will.
Yes, it's not just Israel that's been the constantly attacked by the United Nations through various resolutions condemning Israel, but other countries too. The United States hasn't been treated any better by the United Nations. Can you get into why exactly the U.S. should pull out of the UN? What are some of the reasons why the U.S. specifically should not be part of this world body anymore?
Well, I think Congressman Rogers made some really good points in some of the public statements he's issued. They're constantly attacking our rights and freedoms. They literally claim that a lot of our God-given rights that the founders of America said, we recognize these truths as self-evident, that God has endowed us with certain inalienable rights, right? The right to speak freely, the right to keep and bear arms. I mean, the UN has literally expressed the position on numerous occasions that our right to keep and bear arms and our right to free speech are violations of what the UN defines as human rights. So the UN is a major threat to our freedom. It is a major threat to our ability to govern ourselves, to our national sovereignty and our independence. We've written very extensively on this in the New American. I hope people will go check out some of our articles. It poses a threat to the independence of the United States, to our freedom. And it costs a lot of money. Congressman Thomas Massie, who we interviewed in Wisconsin a few months ago and talked about this bill, he said, about the best thing you can say about the UN is that it's pretty ineffective and wastes a lot of money. And, that's the plus side, right? That they're not necessarily very efficient at what they do. And thank goodness for that. But they are a threat. They legitimize dictatorships and tyrannies. You look at the UN Human Rights Council, you have the communist Chinese dictatorship and the Cuban dictatorship and the Saudi Arabian dictatorship all praising each other's human rights records while they talk about how America is a violation of human rights because we have gun rights and free speech and these things. It really is quite grotesque. And the fact is, the United Nations was set up by totalitarians for totalitarianism. Joseph Stalin didn't set up the UN because he thought we were going to have world peace. He set up the UN because he thought it was going to be a good vehicle to advance totalitarianism at the global level. And of course, he was right. Even on our side, people, globalists like John Foster Dulles wrote the book War or Peace and talked about the UN as kind of the embryonic stage of the world government that he believed could be accomplished under the UN Charter. So the UN is a major threat.
And John Foster Dulles, for those watching who don't recall, he was a Republican, wasn't he?
I believe he was, yep. And he served as Secretary of State and a number of very influential positions. And he was key architect of creating the United Nations. So then, of course, we had Alger Hiss, who was one of our main guys that we sent to the founding conference. They liked him so much, they elected him the first Secretary General. And then we found out he was actually a Soviet spy working for the butcher, Joseph Stalin. So, the UN is a problem from top to bottom. An organization called Hear Their Cries estimated that 60,000 women and children have been raped and sexually exploited by UN officials just in the last decade. So, we should expect to see this kind of stuff. It's the poison fruit of a poison tree. And, people talk about we need to reform it. You can't reform the UN. It's a terrible idea to begin with. It was established for the purpose of subverting liberty and advancing globalism. And so you don't reform something like that. You get rid of it. When you have cancer, you don't talk about reforming your cancer. You got to get rid of the cancer. And the UN is a cancer on the planet, on humanity. And unfortunately, American taxpayer dollars have been financing it from the start.
Absolutely. You mentioned how reforming the United Nations would be an ineffective policy to pursue. In fact, not every Republican, unfortunately, supports this measure. Obviously, we had Republicans in the past, in the 1950s, that supported the United Nations, but even recently, we just had Speaker Paul Ryan and his tenure on January 2nd here and January 3rd when Pelosi was sworn in as a new speaker. But during his reign as the speaker, Paul Ryan, we didn't have any support for this measure, and also under the previous Republican president, George W. Bush, he got us back into UNESCO, if I recall correctly, after it was President Reagan that got us out of it. So clearly there is an an element within the Republican Party that is supportive of the United Nations. And that's something that has to be overcome probably for this bill to get the kind of passage it needs, not just from Democrats in order to pass in the House, but it would need support even from these pro-globalist Republicans. How much of a challenge would you say that is for this bill in Congress with Republicans that support the United Nations, or at least don't believe in pulling out?
Yeah, it is a big challenge, no doubt about it. A huge segment of the Republican, even in the leadership, I think would be properly characterized as rhinos, Republicans in name only. They don't necessarily support the Republican platform. They certainly don't believe the rhetoric they use when they go out to talk to voters. You have people like Dick Cheney, right, who bragged that he used to be a director of the Council on Foreign Relations, the globalist organization, but he never told the voters back home when he was campaigning for election in Wyoming. So you have a lot of these globalists masquerading as conservative Republicans, and they have no interest in abolishing the UN. In fact, they want to strengthen the UN. Paul Ryan is a good example, right? He was in charge of running the House as Speaker of the House, and instead of defunding the United Nations, he continued extracting money from hardworking Americans to send it to the Dictators Club. So it is a big challenge. It's going to continue to be a big challenge, but when there's enough grassroots pressure for something, it can get done. And so I think the challenge now for Americans and for activists who want to see our sovereignty restored is to educate your local community, educate your local opinion molders on the dangers of the United Nations, the threat of the United Nations, why we need to get out, and build grassroots pressure and momentum to finally get us out. And, it's good that we have a bill in there. It's a good starting point. But now we need to do the hard work of educating the American people and the opinion molders in particular to build the public pressure that'll make this bill unstoppable.
So is there something specifically that our viewers out there can do to help promote this bill and to convince their congressmen, whether they're Republicans, conservatives, rhinos, or even Democrats, to try to convince them at least to support this measure? Is there something out there that our viewers can do?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that the viewers can do. Probably the most important is get some materials and go meet with your congressman. Call up their office and say, hey, we're local constituents. We have a group of, you don't have to take in everybody but maybe get a group of 3, 4, 5, 8 people. Tell them we want to meet with you. We have some very serious concerns that we want to discuss with you, and present some information about this. You can print out some of our articles from the New American. You can take print issues, bring in some talking points and talk to your member of Congress. Tell them we want you to co-sponsor this. And, we know that you're not going to vote with us on every single issue. We expect you to uphold your oath of office. But, if you'll work with us on this, and this is a key issue, we will be very happy to support you in return. There's a lot that people can do to influence their members of Congress at the local level, and that starts with developing a relationship with them, getting to know them, getting to know their staffers, and then bringing them accurate information. And, if you live in a far left district of California, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. But, especially the people who live in areas with conservative majorities, in districts with conservative majorities, or where Democrats got elected just by, by the hair of their chinny chin chin. You have a good opportunity here to work with this and educate your congressperson. And I think those are huge. And also, we can't get away from the fact that we have to educate the people. These members of Congress don't elect themselves. And so as long as there's not widespread understanding in your community, in your congressional district, globalist members of Congress who will flaunt their oath of office will continue being reelected. So it's kind of a twofold challenge, but I encourage people out there to get involved in both of those things. And, you can start just by using the form that the John Birch Society has. You can send an email automatically, give them a call the White House, tell the White House to get behind it. There's so much you can do. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, and check out jbs.org for more.
Yeah, we're going to provide those links as well as the link to your article in the description for this video as well, so our viewers can click that and send those action alerts from the JBS to support this bill and to read your article as well. Alex, you have written so many articles covering the United Nations, the various atrocities. So if anyone out there is concerned and wants to learn more about the kind of things going on at the United Nations with the Club of Dictators and so forth, and where this money's being spent and exactly who is who, they should check out your articles at thenewamerican.com, where they can read what you've written in the past for years now over at the New American in regards to the United Nations. Also, Alex, we want to thank you very much for being a part of our program today. So is there any last word that you'd like to tell the viewers out there about this article or anything in relation to the United Nations?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Christian. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I hope people will go down after they read the article to the related articles. A lot of additional material for you there, and you can follow the related articles from those. And you'll be able to find all the ammunition you need to educate your local community, the local opinion molders, and of course your member of Congress on why we need to get the United Nations out of the United States and why we need to get the United States out of the United Nations.
Excellent, excellent work. Well, thank you, Alex. Glad to have you today on the program. And as he said, check out the related articles below because education is the key to this topic like it is for any topic. So check out those articles, get yourselves better informed, and be sure to send out a message to your congressman and U.S. Senator and the President informing them to get behind H.R. 204 if you want the U.S. to get out of the United Nations. Thank you, take care, and good day.